Good morning, friends. It is November 16th, 2024. I've been up since about 4 a.m. because I have a certain dog who likes to have breakfast about then, and I have allowed myself to be trained towards the early mornings. And good thing this morning because it turns out I did have a lab to teach. I've got my ongoing gig. I've been teaching Python, and so I got my Slack channel telling me that I was expected to start teaching at 8 a.m. Or was it 6? No, 7 a.m. Yeah. Anyway, worked out. I'd been awake for a while. I had time to prepare. It's just, I was a bit confused. But then I thought, hey, I've already put in like an hour of teaching. Why not roll on into School of Tomorrow, some additional things? Um, my own thoughts. Like that Python teaching is part of what we do, part of what I do, and it integrates with the rest of what I'm doing as well in terms of synergetics. So this channel has a lot to do with a certain offbeat approach to geometry that's kind of a break from what we're used to, and it's obscure at this point still, even though there is a thriving subculture, I'd say. Like those who get into it really tend to get into it, partly because there's a lot here. Like you'll say, well, that's what every cult member says. And you can call it a cult. I've been up for cult being kind of a neutral term for quite a long time now. It's useful almost just as a nickname or shortened form of the word subculture. I was fortunate enough to have sociology as a subject in the eighth grade. Like most people won't take a course called sociology, if at all, until maybe college. But I was at a pretty forward thinking overseas school of Rome, and the people there on faculty tended to be stellar. I learned eighth grade biology from an actual MD who'd uh, just come to Rome. I forget exactly why, but not to practice medicine exactly. Fly his airplane, maybe. But he taught eighth grade biology kind of just for fun, and he taught it like kind of like first year med school. That was excellent. So in this sociology class, I learned the term subculture and other things like that. You know, the glossary of anthropology terms, sociology terms applied, across several disciplines actually. And so subculture, if you don't want to say that, it's a long term subculture. Just say cult and have it mean whatever you want to mean. And it could be like what is a subculture? Like a profession can be a subculture. For me though, more it's I think a lot. Well, profession is fine, but taking on attributes of the nation state by means it goes both ways with the flags because there was logos, family crests, like the idea of a brand or insignia that signifies a subculture. That's a goes back into religious time. I mean, into early religions had their own brands, right? Their own iconography, you could call it. Decals is another term. When I make model airplanes as a kid out of plastic, gluing it together, then you apply the decals, and that makes it, gives it kind of a nationality. But something like a brand of a corporation, they have decals, they have logos. So those could be subcultures. Like any company that you've ever worked for, that was a subculture, right? We talk about the corporate culture, but the work culture. So as I've been talking, I've been kind of going through what I call my Cultagory theory slide deck. That's a play on words, category theory. Except instead of categories, I have cults. And I've been giving an example of, how different subcultures revector meanings or word meanings, as I put them. I'm not totally sure what Applewhite EJ committed to Stanford in terms of from coming from me, my correspondence. I did have an interaction with him where he let me redact pretty much anything I wanted that he had collected, and then maybe the rest of it, some of it went to Stanford. In any case, maybe one can find where I used to write about word meaning trajectories and have pictures kind of like this. And that was before natural language processing and word to vector really caught on, at least in the popular mindset. Like, I didn't know that was where we were heading in terms of semantic space being vectorized by higher dimensional, hundreds, thousands, millions of dimensions. You got these vectors for every word that has to do with how they embed in a culture, in a subculture. Like, what's close to what, what's far from what, how do these words organize if you run them through training. It's like empirically we were driven to weight them and give them vectors based on their appearance in context. Word to vector, the algorithm I'm talking about. But you can see that as kind of a giant tensegrity, right? It's like you've got all these words, you can think of them as charged particles flying through space. Call them psions. PSY for psychological or mental. A psion is like a meme or an icon, like a religious symbol. What does it mean? Well, it doesn't mean the same thing over time. It changes meaning in relation to other meanings. These all change in relation to each other in a perpetual recomputation, which I liken to the elastic interval geometry computations that I was introduced to through Gerald de Jong and these kinds of software package that model tensegrity. They have a lot of push-pulls built in, and at every delta t, you've got to get the new location of each vertex, and they make these really interesting animations, which Gerald has done a bunch of. So I think of that as kind of a mental model of a perpetually recomputing sort of a zeitgeist cloud where all our subcultures are enmeshed. And people sometimes are consciously revectoring. Like, they are changing the meanings of certain things. Advertisers do this. Propagandists, people who are in charge of PR, they want a quote good image for the company or whatever. They will attempt to revector the associations around a meaning or around a meme, say, like a brand name. So you're all very familiar with this, and some of you are probably good at it and are employed doing it and so on. And so, in a way, I'm not saying anything new. I'm just saying, when you think about synergetics, for example, it does that. It takes the word dimension, it takes the meme 4D, which was very prevalent as I've tracked and as I've learned about through the 1900s, and takes it in its own direction, gives it its own meaning in its own context. And that's what subcultures or cults for short, cult being a nickname for subculture, that's what they are able to do, is take ordinary words internally, maybe give them a different spin, which in turn, though, may have an effect on the outer culture. Like, in the Bucky world, we put all this spin on words like vector equilibrium or which would maybe be the opposite of any spin. It's like there's vector equilibrium as kind of the home base of no stress or strain, and then aberrational, distorted, time-bound consciousness, basically, the lag time that synergetics posits is what surrounds pure equilibrium, which is more or less instantaneous, kind of the eternal now. You could say the truth of everything is sort of at this moment, but there's a lag time for us. We have all these memories. We live in a sort of a dream around now, and that gives us time to have our fantasies and our thoughts and our feelings and our lives and our perceptions. You could call all of that sort of the programming that comes out of the instant. You could call that lag time, and you could say that's sort of the frequency world that we all live in. And the generalized principles are somewhat pre-frequency, right? Sort of before the Big Bang, in a sense. Anyway, that's just me riffing on kind of what synergetics talks about, and it does bring in this tensegrity concept in relation to the role of metaphors and semi-metaphors and truth, and how it is we might want to envision what we're doing when we're doing philosophy and so on. It's kind of fun stuff, and it's got a math that goes with it, and that's a subculture. And those who get into it sometimes get pretty deeply into it. So just letting you know that that's where my slides have taken me lately. And Python, like I say, is a big part of it. And so is in this subculture that I'm in, the Silicon Forest, we have a lot of Native American heritage and casinos in particular. And I do this casino math as one of four kind of generic topic areas in what I call digital math of the Silicon Forest. And all that's folded into the School of Tomorrow, where I just take up specific topics. I'm not trying to be all things to all people in School of Tomorrow. It's not trying to be the generic textbook that everyone in America uses or anything like that. It's much more regionalized, localized, but therefore maybe more interesting. And I talk about very specific philosophers, philosophies, and I weave in autobiography and local geography. It's place based. This is an approach in education that a lot of people advocate. It's like make it be about where you are and your space and time, but branch out from there to encompass a greater and greater universe, right? But start from somewhere, and why have it? Why not have it be where you're at? You being a curriculum developer or a participant in a curriculum. So that's where we're at. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you online. Talk to you later.